Welcome to Ask the Expert on Contingent Workforce Strategies LinkedIn group. And you will have a lot of fun with this session. We have an amazing topic that seems to be on the tips of everyone's tongues and top of mind as we start talking about the future of work and AI and how things are all going to come together. And more importantly, I have an amazing future thinking guest on the show today, coming to you from Singapore. And so the topic for today is the future of total talent management and finding the optimum resource mix at the intersection of freelancers, full-time staff, and synthetic labor, meaning AI and agents and things of the future. And my guest today is none other than Vinos Samuel. And a lot of people in the industry know him from his, implementing programs, managing large scale multi-market environments across Asia Pacific and globally. He's worked on some of the largest contingent programs across APAC. He's built and led regional contingent workforce, RPO practices, HR operation programs at Netflix. And previous to that, he was also working with some of the largest vendors in our space at Randstad and RPO provider Cielo. He really sits where talent, procurement, finance, and legal all comes together. And we have been talking several times on this future of total talent management and how AI and synthetic labor is going to fall into that mix as well. So it's going to be an amazing conversation. So, Venus, thank you for taking the time, especially such early time in Singapore today, to talk to me.
No worries. Thanks, Jeff. I'm excited to speak on this topic. It is, in some terms, esoteric. In some terms, it is something that is needed for the world that's changing all around us. So I'm excited.
Well, it is amazing because how quickly AI has really come onto the scene, right?
Yeah,
And how it's rapidly evolving from, you know, the idea of it being helping with decisions to then providing content in the LLMs to now the agentic world to the robotic world, right? And now we're starting to see potential layoffs due to AI. I think it's probably, shifts in how work is getting done.
yeah,
But I don't think the human factor will ever go away from being part of the
right.
workforce. And quite honestly, at least for a very long, long time, because even
Yeah,
as we shift to the amazing advancement of technology, the change of and the adoption of the new technology is taking longer than most people will actually think, right? And
that
what the
is true.
hype is telling us. So
Yeah,
it's an incredible topic, and we've always talked about the optimum resource mix when we talked about freelance to contract to full-time to outsource type project work. And now we're talking synthetic labor. So
right.
give me a little bit of overview of this and what you're seeing
Yeah,
and, working on.
right. So so when we talk about total talent, we've spoken about it for more than a decade, right? It's great in theory. In practice, not many have been able to put it across. But if you define it, so far we've been talking about full-time employees and contractors, including freelancers and so on. The discussion has already always started with workforce planning. How many contractors do we need versus how many full-time employees do we need? It's about budget management. It's about flexibility, right? But with this wave of AI coming in, it throws in another factor within, which is, as you rightly mentioned, um, how much of work will be done by a machine, right? Either in the form of aiding productivity for your workforce that's there, or doing it itself when it comes to the agentic world. So so that's the intersection that we see now. So you have full-time employees, you have freelancers and flexible capacity, and now you have what you call as synthetic labor, right? Like AI agents who can execute work at scale. Just recently, just last week, Perplexity announced their product called Computer. And that computer, once you give it the task that you want to do, it can run for hours until it finishes the work and gives it to you. And that could be a replacement for any software that you have in your company. It could be debugging anything that you have. It could be even flagging cybersecurity risks within the applications that you run and things that you produce. So that's the world that we're getting in, where you have these agents coming in. But when these agents come in, then also the question becomes not the optimal mix, that is one question, but how would you categorize this new labor coming in too, right? Like
Yeah.
what spend do they fall under, right? How do you badge them, right? How do you know what work are they doing? How are they going to interact with the other employees within your organizations at different levels, at different um, functions that they do, the privileges that they have, the security guardrails that they have. So that's the other part of questions that comes up. So
Yeah.
so all of this is happening so fast, right? You mentioned about optimal mix for full-time employees and contractors, and that if you see over the last 10 years, it moved from, let's say, 10%, and it's gone up to now 40% in most organizations. So it's not reached an optimal mix, but the trend is that it's becoming more flexible and less fixed, and that's the sign of the market
Yeah.
that we're living through. And now with agentic systems coming in, what is coming to the fore is the fragmented nature of how total talent is managed within an organization, because full-time employees sit in the realm of HR, like mostly TA, and financial planning or modeling takes full-time employees as the core for the work that they do. Contractors usually sit with procurement. We see more and more of those programs coming towards TA, and there's an interconnection coming through from a talent acquisition perspective, or from a conversion perspective, which becomes a
Yeah.
channel for full-time employees, from an experience perspective, from a knowledge transfer perspective, and those kind of elements that's coming together. We are also seeing a lot of emphasis on internal mobility. And when you talk about internal mobility, then that also comes under the total talent focus, because you're saying, what talent do we have internally who could do the work? Where do we go out to buy? And if you go out to buy, does that have to be a full-time employee, or does that have to be a contractor, etc.? So that's the framework that we are working under. And then when synthetic labor comes in, who owns that, right?
Yeah.
By default, it goes to IT, because they are the ones who implement IT products. And this seems to be like an IT product, but actually it's not, right? Because it has elements of how work is getting done. So I think that's the other piece that organizations are dabbling with. And also, who owns the spend? How do you park that spend under? Is it a workforce spend? Is it an IT spend? Is it an operations budget, and those kind of things? So lots to unpack for organizations. But where I feel organizations need to focus more is, or rather, change their mindset is not looking at it as a labor category, or how do we get these tools internally to work, but how can we deconstruct our work itself, right? And then put some
That's the other
framework.
side of it, right? How do we start to think of it more task based than
Correct.
just an org chart
Yeah.
seat, a role based organization, right? To
Yes.
say, I need this work done um, in a task completion perspective, and how are we going to do that? So then, do we break it down the skills required,
Yeah.
which then, okay, that's the skills required. Who has those skills, and
Yeah.
what percentage of their time do we need to complete that, or do we
Right.
not worry about it being time because,
Yeah.
you know, agents can do it faster than a human and sometimes cheaper, but sometimes more expensive than humans
Correct.
doing it too, right? Especially when we truly start to think about the talent being fully globalized, right?
Yes.
And so there is so many decisions to be
Mm.
made to optimize the total talent mix because it's timing, cost,
Yeah.
skills, who's the best to complete those tasks
Yeah.
with
Correct.
those parameters and making the
Yeah.
decisions. Are you starting to see AI help in the decision making process, given the analytical speed they can and
Yeah.
the power it has to make the analytics,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
On these types of inputs?
Yeah, I do. I'm seeing it, and also there's a growth curve, right? Like I used to manage Johnson and Johnson at one point in time, and they had something called a storefront, where anybody who wants to procure products or labor goes to the storefront, and the storefront then guides them to go to TA, go to a contingent talent program, or go to procurement for certain things. So you have that as a lens, right, in terms of how it can work. But now with AI coming in, that's a rigid way of doing it, saying that okay, these three questions, if it's a yes, you go here. If it's no, you go here, sort of a thing. So it's very static. But now with LLMs coming in, those decision trees that can be made in order to help hiring managers and business leaders upstream when they're talking about what they need to do within their teams, right? That's where I see innovation and also application coming through. So, for example, if I'm a hiring manager or business leader and I see, I mean, in my old lens, I would say, oh, I need three people to come in and do this project that we are getting into. But now it's like, okay, this is a work that we want to do, what's the best way to do it, right?
Mm.
And before, you don't have a person to go to talk about all the different channels of hiring that you have, right? So you had to go to TA, and TA would always anchor on, okay, let's hire full-time employees, right? And that's the lens that they would look at. But now you can say, okay, this is the work to do, and this is the outcome that we are expecting. I don't see this work is going to be continual. It's going to be over the next year or so. Now, with all of these factors in, what's the best way to do it? And whether I have a headcount, I don't have a headcount, do I have an operations budget to look at, etc. So those are the variables. And once you feed the LLM with those variables and say, hey, this is the scenario, then you get a better output.
Yeah.
So I see decision trees moving in that advisory um, state rather than being very, very rigid.
Well, and it's interesting too because in the past you would go to a human
Yeah,
for help with this decision tree aspects. Like you say, a
yeah,
storefront, but generally a storefront quickly moved to an advisory role, be it talent, resource management, or procurement, right? Like you've mentioned in the past. Now,
yeah,
with technology, and you've dabbled in this realm, and I know a lot of people are talking around the digitization of the human decision trees and the mind, so digital twinning, let's call it, or using and for layman's terms, kind of a chat bot or a
yeah,
conversational AI
yeah,
bot, let's call
yeah,
it, right? To help, do the qualifications. So help with the
right,
intake and conversation around what the need is.
yeah,
And so based on that, can ask you different questions and
yeah,
then help you with the decision as you move forward to go and
correct,
say, okay, here's your 3 or 4 options that we see. And if you've got the right data, like you say,
yeah,
around internal labor, external labor, or agentic synthetic labor, then it can present you to different options
yeah,
and the percentage of each that you need,
correct,
and even start to build your resourcing plan and project plans around how to resource it.
yeah, exactly. Yeah, that's where talent insights become key, because if you can feed that, then it becomes more powerful. But many organizations are not there. So even if when
Yeah.
your data is not there, you don't know how to connect it, that decision-making support can still be there with the LLMs that are trained on the whole of the web, right? And the whole of the web has a lot of information already in terms of how to model a scenario for the different channels of hiring that we have. And then you can, of course, go to a human. But you can also extrapolate this to how it would work. Like if you have all the talent all the insights connected to it, then it can make even better decisions for you. Then if you put in the agentic capabilities in, then it also means that it could go to a VMS, create a rec. It could go to an ATS, create a request for TA for you, or it could just go out to your candidate pipeline that you have and also pull people who may fit the requirements that you have. So the agentic capabilities from that decision becomes faster too. You don't have to then say, oh, let me do an intake call with somebody and let them understand me, let them go out and do something. So I think that's the pace, and that's the change in how workflows will change, or how work gets done will change as well.
Yeah, and so it's not only helping with the decision and strategy, it can then transition into helping with the execution, right? The
Correct.
tactical execution, which
Yeah.
typically in our industry had been either an internal program team
Yeah.
or an external MSP doing a lot of the tactical
Mm.
aspects of it as well, getting it into the VMS, getting that out to the vendor community, intake of resumes, starting to
Screening.
rank resumes, right? And understanding um,
Yeah.
the candidates and helping with the decision around who to hire.
Yeah.
Um, and then moving it to then the execution on the contracting side and onboarding side. And so
Yeah.
there is a future there when you start to think about the agentic side and
Mm.
digitization of the tactical
Yeah.
aspects of
Yeah.
what's needed to get work done as well.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So let's take, for example, audits, right? Like, for example, you want to know um, what's our talent candidate contractor pool, and where are the risks exposed today, right? Like, what's it from a tenure perspective, from a labor law in a certain country perspective, the kind of work that they're doing, the match of that work to full-time work, and those kind of things. Today, if a human has to sit and do it, that's a project, right? And that cannot be
Right.
done on a continual basis. It probably is once a year, or once in 2 years, depending upon how organizations and programs look at it. But now you could have like a system which can always vet your contractors and clearly call out when there is going to be a compliance issue that's going to crop up in terms of tenure, in terms of other aspects that are very particular to that particular country, right? So
Yeah.
so I think applications are quite a lot.
Well, and compliance with contracts, right? That was always something that was such a manual process that
Yeah.
it never happened. If you're able to utilize tools to analyze, here's the agreement, here's the
Yeah.
rates and terms agreed to, and then go to the practical aspect of it and start to review invoicing and then
Yeah.
finding discrepancies in rates and invoicing to what was agreed upon in contracts. Those are
Yeah.
massive amounts of cost savings that can
Yeah.
drive incredible efficiencies and cost savings for organizations. And I've seen it happen, right? Especially
Mm.
if you go back a few years of billing, if you haven't done it, that results in an extensive amount of cost savings typically
Yeah.
because it's just
Sure.
human nature to
Correct.
have errors, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And or potentially worse, um, no and overbilling that
Yeah.
happens in our industry often as well. And so, these types of tools, there is a business case to start to
Mm.
implement them sooner than
Yeah.
later in a lot of cases.
That's yeah. And I do see when I talk to clients, right, as an independent consultant now, everybody wants to do it, but nobody is putting that effort and the appetite to kind of break down their work and say, how do we do it and where does this fit in, right? So I always give them this framework that, hey, do not get directly to automate, right? first think about what are the work that you can eliminate, which is not needed because we've always done it. So that's why we are doing it. But
Yeah.
is that adding any value, right? So you eliminate first, then you see, can you simplify the work that is remaining? And then you say, okay, in this simplified work or design that we have, or the workflow that we have, where can LLMs come in? And you don't have to go directly to agentic as well, right? Like most organizations now have co-pilots, and
Yeah.
co-pilots are pretty good to do a lot of this work as well. Maybe there's a human in the loop to feed in the data or create that scenario, but the outcome that comes out from there would have taken a person a whole day, but now you could probably do it in an hour or two.
Yeah.
So that's where your productivity increases, and that's where you start doing things in a different way. And then that would then lead you to, okay, now that we do it this way, what else can we do? Agentic and so on.
So it's interesting because I think it's a matter of really stepping back and going, what are my drivers and what
Yeah.
benefits can I derive from starting to implement both technology and, better decisions around within what we're doing, right? So
Mhm.
what are some of the, this topic of optimizing your talent mix between the various types of labor, and then what is the benefits
Mm.
of this if you were to just outline them for
Yeah.
the audience?
So the benefits are huge, right? The first one, the obvious one, which drives the business today, is margin pressures and cost pressures. Now, if there is one thing that every department can do for the business is contributing towards this goal that the organizations have. And how do you do that in the world that we come from is ensuring that we kind of help optimize the fixed costs that the organization carries from a workforce perspective. Now, when you put that lens, then you say, okay, are there any pockets of work that can come in, be done from a flexible workforce perspective so that it doesn't add on to our fixed costs such that we contribute to the operating budget and margins and so on. So if that's the way you look at it, then of course, freelancers and contractors coming in to do certain part of your work helps to that business objective. And then of course, synthetic labor coming in, because that if you get it right, it's not a cost that you're going to bear month on month or year over year. You do it once, and then that's it. Like it's like a technology that you're implementing. You're taking the
Yeah.
cost now and spreading it out. There's nothing incrementally coming and hitting you. So you're contributing a lot more to the organization budget from organization reality of constraints when it comes to cost. And then when it comes to your organizations as well, now they're becoming more global, right? You can hire anywhere, right? And you can manage them because most of them work remotely. In that lens too, right? Can you expand your channels of hiring? Can you speeden up your reach to get the right talent to come and work for you, etc.? Broadens when you get this right in terms of looking at it from a total talent perspective. So I think those two are really key. And also, if you see or you follow the HR trend, we are all moving towards skill-based organizations,
Yes.
or at least in theory, we say it's again like total talent, a very difficult implementation and change management to do within an organization. First, to identify what's a skill, whether a person has it, and if that skill changes, how do you record it, etc. So defining it and making it implementing is a different one. But if you imagine have a skills based organization, then how does that skills based organization goes about hiring and onboarding, etc.? It has to go through the different channels that you have, because for those skills you may not have everything internally. You may have to go and buy and or build.
Yeah. So, it definitely drives the business case, right? When you think about making sure you have the right talent at the right time to help the organization move forward with the work that it has to complete, contributing to cost savings and the bottom line. And then, of course, the liability and the risk aspects.
Yes.
Technology and can help optimize that as
Yeah.
well. Um, so there's a lot of benefits of doing this, but I don't see people often implementing it
Yeah.
either the right way or even moving forward. They talk about it a
Yes.
lot. Total talent management has always been a buzzword, right? And then
Yeah.
when they go to do it, they stub their toe or they're a little bit nervous to implement. So,
Yeah.
what are some of the challenges and obstacles that people bump into
Yeah.
when thinking about this topic or trying to move the total talent
Yeah.
management, especially with all the aspects we're talking about in this discussion?
Yeah.
What are some of the obstacles and challenges that they face and why they're not doing it?
Yeah. That's that's the space that I've been thinking quite a lot. So at Netflix, we were in the direction to kind of get to total talent, and many organizations don't go on that path is because of visibility, right? You don't have in the current way of working, you don't have the visibility of, I mean, you have a lot of visibility on your full-time employees, but you have
Yeah.
very less visibility on how else work is getting done, right? With your contractors, with SOWs that you have, with freelancers who come in and what kind of work are they doing, etc. So that's the big gap, right? So how many workers do we have on the other side, the non-employee side? What work are they doing? How much are we spending, right? Which departments are they working with? Where are we getting them from? Are they converting? So those kind of things are missing. So that's why nobody sees it. That's one. At Netflix, what we did was we have a data pack that goes to the business on a quarterly basis that talks about our trends in hiring or attrition and those kind of things. We incorporated non-employee workforce in the data pack. So when it goes to the business sees the whole workforce as a whole, and that gives them an idea, okay, there is this component as well, we're bringing them for this kind of work, etc. So that kind of brings it to their fore. And then when they talk about workforce planning and org design, etc., the HRBPs who come in to talk, if they have the wider view and capability of talking about different channels of hiring and engagement that we have, then that becomes a very different conversation when you're talking about, hey, I want to change my org for the next year. These are the new types of skills that we're going to hire. And then HRBP can say, hey, I don't see this to be full time. We could augment it through this way, that way, etc. Now, that's the layer that's missing within a lot of organizations because HRBPs are not equipped or don't have that lens. So my thinking or my conversation with some of the clients have been like, hey, you need to create a role like this. It could be like a workforce channel advisor, right? Who has a view of full-time to synthetic and can help advise or at least build your org plans in that way. And then of course you have your procurement team to help you with your contractor decisions. You have your MSP teams, you have your TA teams, you have your internal mobility teams. Then how do you get them together? Then it becomes an orchestration
Mhm.
game to help move on. So I think that's how I see it. I mean, it's a change that is difficult, but it can be done if you can think through from first principles.
Well, yeah, and having the data, right? It does
Yes.
start with the data, which has been a lot of the challenges with legacy companies that have desperate systems that were have built silos, quite
Yeah.
honestly, in the organization, be it on purpose, uh, be it just a natural legacy issue.
Yeah.
And so getting that data together, and it sounds like you've had that experience in the past, that gives the
Mhm.
visibility into the potential options,
Yeah.
right, for the talent. And
Correct.
then I love the idea of the workforce advisor that can help orchestrate all of the
Yeah.
moving parts and help be that advisor. Interestingly
Right.
enough, though, a lot of organizations are putting pressure on the HR departments and cutting
Yes.
people in HR and
Mm.
not giving, a replacement at this point.
Mm.
I don't know if they think AI can do this, right? Or if
Right.
they're just saying, well, we're not hiring this year, so, and we've laid people off, so we don't need an HR department. But it seems like there's pressure on the HR organizations, which is opposite to some of
Yeah.
the things that you're saying in our conversation.
Yeah. That's absolutely true. Like HR can do so much value added work, but they're not able to do because of the transactional work that they get caught in, right? So
Mhm.
the way to look at it is how can we remove those transactional work through agents and AI that's available, and how can you elevate it rather than just eliminate it? So elimination for me seems like a knee jerk reaction, which is going to come back and bite at some point,
Yeah.
if not thoughtfully done. Of course, I'm not saying that everybody's having a knee jerk reaction, but it could be, right?
Yeah.
Um, yeah,
One thing I wanted to get back to the beginning a little bit about was the idea of synthetic labor and some of the ideas of properly implementing it within this talent mix, right? And calling it labor
yeah,
is probably a good hint on some of the best
mm,
practices around
yeah,
integrating it into
right,
your workforce, either to complement the existing human talent
yeah,
and help them be more productive, or be part of the labor pool. And then how do you integrate that? Because, like you mentioned, when an agent is acting inappropriately, how
yes,
do we get it back on track? Do we have
yeah,
to do agent
yeah,
employee
right,
kind of um, things that you have to reprimand, or at least reprimand the creators of them to come back and hopefully put them on a plan to get back on track, right? Like there is some truth to using traditional HR methods when dealing even with synthetic non-human labor.
right, right. No, absolutely. Um, I know Workday and SAP are building these agent system of record kind of layer on top of their product because they know this world is coming. They know every provider is going to create their own agents who can then work within your enterprise systems within the organizations, right? And what privileges would those have in terms of what data can they pull, what kind of decisions can they make, when are they working, when are they not working, what outcome have they made, who have they interacted with, etc. Have to be captured at some point. So it does apply. Like that's how employees get
Yeah.
tracked as well, right? In terms of what work they do, what privileges do they have. It's the same thing that's translating to the agents as well. And for an employee, I think the future of work is also not them doing the work, but them orchestrating the agents to do the work, right? So I may come to work and I may have three agents working for me for my role. One could be creating content, one could be creating the video based on that content, and one could be just going out and publishing it. And I would be here to take care of the edge cases or giving the directions and ensuring that the work is getting done and what else to be done, right? In order to hit the larger goals. So I think that's how employment is going to change, and that's where synthetic labor will come in and help too.
Yeah. And we'll have to see how it's all integrated into this workforce strategy.
Yeah.
Um, so, some of the best practices around total talent, you know, I think it's always been part of that golden grail, if you can get it right, scenarios. And have you seen some best practices? Well, let's look back historically and then thinking to the future as we implement other types of labor, like we talked about
Yeah.
synthetic labor. But have you seen some business use cases and case studies that you think have really got it right?
Um, not not an organizational level, right? I've seen cases of certain functions, certain countries do it better, right? I've
Yeah.
seen cases where organizations have an RPO provider and they bake in contingent hiring within that same program. So what that does is then you have from the provider an advisor who is then connecting with the business and advising them on what's the best channel to hire. And then based on that, then you're going and saying, okay, full-time hire, contractor hire, and then they're all getting onboarded through the same team. And they have an overview over the technologies that are used, and they could give an overview, a combined dashboard and spend information and those kind of things. So I think I've seen it work that way, but for some reason, those have not scaled into global programs due to the other reasons that we've discussed, right? Big one for me is the understanding of this lens of how to look at total talent is not embedded within an organization, especially within the HR function who could drive it, like within the CHROs and the head of TAs and HRBPs and so on. I think that's the big gap that I see. Now, when I see it from internally, having worked at Netflix,
Yeah.
why these don't pick up. The value is there, but it doesn't get picked up because it's very hard to change your lens from the old way to something new. Yeah.
And I think that's the opportunity that, will be there for a long time coming, helping organizations move in this direction to implement the changes needed to optimize their talent and resourcing mixes.
Yeah.
We're kind of getting to the end of the conversation here, and I always love the idea of, okay, we've talked very broadly. We've talked about, why this is so
Yeah.
important, some of the key benefits that can really
Yeah.
drive a business case forward to start to do things. We've talked about it, some of the challenges and barriers. And in talking in such a large scope, it sometimes is intimidating. So I like to bring it back for the audience
Mm.
on, okay, if I'm really serious about
Yeah.
implementing total talent management that's going to help our organization find the talent, save
Yeah.
money, and ensure compliance by giving our managers and our organization options that optimize the talent mix to get work done. How do I start?
Mm.
It's always great talking about it, but it's then very important to take that first
Yeah.
step or first number of steps
Yeah.
to then get the momentum to really make a difference and start moving in the right direction. So, where would you start on the topic?
I think that's a good question. The other factor is who's asking that question and what can they do, right? So if it starts at the top, that's a different kind of an answer. If it starts at a program level or a functional level, that's a different kind of an answer. But what I would say is we touched upon a couple of things. Visibility, get as much visibility as possible because that will help drive good conversations in changing the lens with the decision makers who are
Yeah.
there, right? The second is if you want to hit at one leverage point, I would think that is that who could be that person who could look at all the channels of hiring and be that spokesperson for the business in helping have the conversation. It's not an overnight change. It comes in gradually as you start talking about these different options that are there and how we can hire them, etc. So if you have an advisor who's got that ear with the business and who can continuously talk about it, maybe over a period of time, you would start changing. If from a work perspective, if you talk about it, then I would say for every piece of work, for every request that's coming over, ask a few questions, right? Like ask, does this require judgment? Does this require pattern recognition, etc.? Or ask if this is recurring work or is it episodic work, right? Ask if it's core IP for the organization, like if it's Netflix, is it the technology and content, or it's anything that is peripheral, right? Like maybe post-production and those kind of things. And then probably also ask like, does the scale linearly with more volume coming in? Because once you ask these kind of questions, then you can easily say, oh, okay, if it's high judgment and core part of the organization, it has to be a full-time employee, right?
Yeah.
But if it's specialized and it's episodic, then it could be a freelancer or a contractor who comes in. And then if it's pattern recognition and if it's repeatable, that's where your synthetic labor comes in, because they do the best work there. And then your FTEs and contractors can work with those. So I think if you can put a framework like that, would help. The other framework that I told you of simplify, eliminate, simplify, and automate, I think that's a great one to start, and to start putting that into every bucket of work that you do, and then kind of go from there.
Well, I can't thank you enough. This is a topic that I think will be needed a continuation of discussion around because there's such an evolution of where we're going with this.
Yeah,
And I think technology will help us achieve that total talent mix, help us
I think,
with the decisions, the calculations needed to make better decisions. And I'm so excited for where things are going in the next year or two, right? So,
yeah, absolutely. Maybe
Venus,
technology is that advisor.
well, that is the interesting part, right? It
Yeah,
becomes the advisor potentially. So I can't thank you enough for your time, especially it's very early for you in Singapore. So I appreciate you getting up and taking the time to have a conversation and look forward to having more conversations with you, especially on the technology side of things. And I know you've got a lot of work being done as we speak around that. So look forward to the next time we speak.
awesome, absolutely. This is a great chatting, Jeff. Great topic, and I appreciate you getting me on this forum.
Take care.
Thank you. Have a good